The crossroads is burning. Staff Sergeant Thomas Reeves presses his eye against the gunner's sight and watches a Panther tank turn its 75 mm barrel directly toward him. 200 meters, maybe less. The morning mist of Normandy has done nothing to soften the geometry of what is happening. One American Sherman against 4 German Panthers. 3 other American tanks already on fire behind him, and orders crackling through the radio that make no sense to a man who has already committed too deep to turn back. The round hits. The Sherman rocks. His loader, Private Danny Kowalski from Pittsburgh, screams something behind him. Thomas Reeves does not look back. He keeps his eye on the sight. This is July 18th, 1944, near the Bourget-Bousse Ridge, Normandy, France. The crossroads ahead, a small stone-walled intersection the U.S. Army maps, labeled simply as Point X7, had been in German hands for 11 days. In those 11 days, 3 previous American attempts to take it had failed. 31 American soldiers had been killed or wounded trying. 2 Shermans burned as permanent monuments to what happens when American armor meets prepared SS positions without accurate intelligence. By the time the Germans had finished positioning at Bourget-Bousse Ridge, they had briefed every crew on a single tactical priority. Identify the long-gun Shermans first. Kill them first. The British had been fielding the Sherman Firefly, the one fitted with the 17-pounder gun that could kill a tiger at range. The Americans had their own answer, the 76mm M1A1. Either way, the SS tankers had orders. The long barrel means death. Destroy it before it destroys you. SS Hauptsturmführer Klaus Brenner, commanding the Panther platoon at Point X7, had drilled his crews on this exact scenario. He had done it at Kursk. He had done it at Kharkov. He had never been dislodged from a position he chose to hold. Intelligence, it turned out, was the first thing that failed today. The Panther is traversing its turret. Thomas Reeves has perhaps 4 seconds before it reacquires him. There is a letter in his breast pocket, folded twice, edges worn soft from handling, that he has not had time to finish reading since yesterday morning. His sister wrote it. She is 14 years old, and she asked him to come home. He is going to come home. But first, he has to take this crossroads alone. And behind that burning hedgerow, he's somewhere in the smoke. There is a second Panther he hasn't found yet. The one that should have already killed him, and didn't, only because of something that happened in the previous 90 seconds that no one who survived that morning could fully explain. Keep watching. Because what Thomas Reeves did next changed how German tank commanders wrote about American armor for the rest of the war. Thomas Allen Reeves was born in Zanesville, Ohio, on March 4th, 1921. His father ran a hardware store. His mother taught 4th grade. He was the oldest of 3 children, and by the time he turned 16, he could rebuild a Ford Flathead Fig 8 in an afternoon, which is the kind of thing that makes a young man feel genuinely useful in a world not yet asking much of him. He was not a spectacular student. He was not a troublemaker. And he was the kind of young man his neighbors described as steady. And in small-town Ohio in the late 1930s, steady was not a compliment. It was an expectation. He enlisted 4 days after Pearl Harbor. He was 20 years old. The Army put him in armor because of the engine knowledge. Fort Knox Kentucky, the tanker training program. By the time he shipped out in late 1943 with the 3rd Armored Division, he had spent 2 years learning to love the Sherman tank the way a pilot learns to love a difficult aircraft, through deep familiarity with its limits. He knew what the M4A1 could do. More importantly, he knew exactly what it couldn't. His crew called him Tomcat. Not for aggression. They called him that because of a thing he did during training. Now, when a commanding officer tried to dress him down for improvising a solution to a stuck traverse mechanism during a live fire exercise, Reeves had looked at the man calmly and said, "It worked, sir." Then he climbed back into the tank and hit the target. The name stuck. The men who served with him in Bravo Company, 33rd Armored Regiment, described him uniformly as someone who never panicked. Private First Class Eldon Marsh, his bow gunner, wrote home in June 1944 that Reeves is the type of man you want in the seat next to God when things go wrong. His loader, Danny Kowalski, who had grown up in a Pittsburgh steel mill and had very little patience for poetry, said simply, "He doesn't freeze. I've never seen him freeze." That would be tested today in ways none of them had imagined at the briefing. And there is one other thing worth knowing. His sister, Clara, was 14. She wrote him letters with the relentless regularity that only teenagers can sustain, chatty, specific, full of school gossip and questions about France. Her most recent letter had reached him 4 days ago. It ended with 7 words he had read 11 times. "Come home, Tommy. I made your room nice." He had folded it and put it in his left breast pocket, directly over his heart, which is a thing soldiers do when they have a specific reason to come back. Today he had a very specific reason. This video gives you the story, but the Combat Blueprint, our free newsletter, gives you everything that doesn't fit in a video. Deeper details. Forgotten heroes free to join. 10 seconds to sign up. A link in the description. Now back in the video, the briefing took place at 0430 on July 18th in a field just south of Caen, under a canvas tarpaulin that smelled like wet wool and diesel. The objective was Point X7, a stone-walled crossroads intersection near the village of Solières on the Bourget-Beauce Ridge, controlling the main supply route the Allied forces needed to advance the breakout south of Caen. Whoever held that crossroads controlled movement through nearly 4 kilometers of open ground. The Germans knew it. The Americans knew it. The position had been retaken after a brief Allied capture and was now held by elements of the 1st SS Panzer Division. The Leibstandarte, SS Adolf Hitler. Before any American entered the briefing room, they should have asked about the history of Point X7. The Leibstandarte SS had held the ridge since D+12. In the 11 days prior to this operation, they had destroyed or disabled 7 Allied tanks at or near Point X7 specifically. The most recent attempt, 4 days ago, had been a British armor troop supported by infantry. The crews never made it past 300 meters. Surviving infantrymen reported the German response was instantaneous and coordinated, as if they had walked into a machine that had been running for days. The German commander at that crossroads was SS Hauptsturmführer Klaus Brenner, a veteran of Kursk, of Kharkov, of every place on the Eastern Front where armored warfare had been refined into something approaching science. He and his crew had been together since 1942, and they operated their Panther Ausführung G with the economical precision of men who had long since stopped being afraid of anything they could see coming. His firing positions were pre-registered to the meter. His sight lines had been cleared. He had been briefed on the upgraded Sherman variants, the Firefly, the 76 mm, and had given his crews specific orders on target priority. He had faced the improved Sherman gun before, in brief engagements near Villers-Bocage, and had walked away. He had never lost a position he chose to hold. He was waiting, without particular concern, for the Americans to try again. What the intelligence assessment gave the briefing room was this: 2 Panzer IV Ausführung H tanks, 1 POC 40 anti-tank gun, an estimated platoon of SS infantry. American forces would commit 5 Shermans, a full platoon, with a rifle squad moving along the hedgerow line to the east. The intelligence officer delivered this with the calm confidence of a man who had not personally driven down that road. The plan hit reality at 06:12. Overnight, on July 17th to 18th, a 2nd SS Panzer platoon had moved into position along the northern hedgerow line. Not 2 Panzer IVs, not 3. 4 Panthers total, including Brenner's command vehicle, plus the original POC 40 and 2 additional Panzerschreck teams, now positioned in the ruins of a stone barn at the eastern edge of the objective. The position had been reinforced in darkness, quietly, by men who had done exactly this before. The lead Sherman, commanded by Lieutenant Harold Forsyth from Alabama, exploded at 06:12. Not took a hit, exploded, and the round penetrated the front glacis, found the ammunition rack, and what had been a 67,000-pound tank became a pillar of orange fire in approximately half a second. The 2nd Sherman began maneuvering left and was hit twice in 45 seconds. The 4th Sherman attempted to reverse, threw a track in the ditch, and became a stationary target the Germans took their time with. 3 Shermans, under 2 minutes. At 06:19, the radio crackled with Captain Aldrich Morrison's voice. 5 words: "All units, abort. Pull back, now." Sergeant Reeves looked at his position. He was already through the first hedgerow gap. He was already inside the kill zone. The 5th Sherman behind him had stopped at the gap, blocking the only exit, with its radio gone. If he reversed, he drove into smoke and blind confusion. If he stopped, and the Panther that had just killed 2 Shermans in under a minute would reacquire him in 10 seconds or less. He was not making a heroic choice. He was making the only choice. He told Kowalski to load armor-piercing. He told Marsh to get on the bow gun and not stop. He told his driver, Private First Class Howard Getz from Iowa, to keep moving forward no matter what. He had 31 76 mm rounds, 1.50 caliber machine gun with approximately 200 rounds. No radio contact with battalion. No supporting infantry. The rifle squad had gone to ground in the first minute of fire and was not moving. And a right track that had been making a grinding sound since Caen that he had never quite gotten fixed. Ahead of him, a crossroads held by 4 Panther tanks and an SS unit that had never once been dislodged from a position it chose to hold. 1 American soldier, 1 uncaptured position. The mission, whether anyone at battalion intended it or not, was still active. He moves. The Sherman crosses the first open stretch at full speed, about 20 miles an hour, which in a tank feels faster than it sounds and slower than you need it to be. The smoke from the 3 burning Shermans behind him is both a problem and a protection. He can't see clearly. Neither can they. But they can hear him. SS Hauptsturmführer Brenner had been in armor long enough to recognize the precise pitch of a Sherman engine at combat speed. He had also been doing this long enough to know when something was wrong with what he was hearing. His radio operator reported contacts from the direction of the American approach, but the pattern was strange. One engine, moving forward instead of retreating. Brenner ordered his gunner to traverse right and wait. He told his other tank commanders, hold fire until identification. This was the correct tactical response from a professional soldier with an overwhelming advantage. The Panther's 75mm KE Basquet 42L/70 gun could penetrate the front glacis of an M4A1 Sherman at ranges exceeding 1,800 meters. Reeves was inside 250 meters and closing. The Panther was hull down behind a stone wall, turret exposed, and the wall was thick enough to defeat anything the Sherman carried. Brenner had pre-positioned here specifically because the approach angle forced any attacking tank to present its front or side armor to his gun. He had done this before. It had worked before. The PaK-40 crew, stationed in the ruins of the barn to the northeast, had also acquired a target. Then the ambush triggered. From the southern hedgerow, a position on no American map, dug in during the previous 72 hours by a Panzer IV crew working in darkness, a shaped charge round hit the Sherman's right track. The track came apart. The Sherman spun hard right, slewing sideways, and stopped. This was the kill position. A stationary Sherman with its right side presented to 2 gun systems and the PaK-40. In the history of Normandy armor engagement, no tank that had ended up in this geometry had survived the following 30 seconds. It was not bad luck. It was a trap built on intelligence, patience, and professional execution. Brenner's platoon had rehearsed responses to every possible American move at this crossroads. They had not rehearsed for what happened next. Reeves felt the tank stop moving, felt the grinding vibration die, looked through his sight, and understood in approximately 2 seconds what had happened and what it meant. What he did in the next 3 seconds made no tactical sense, until you understand what he had already seen, something no one else on that battlefield could see. He ordered Getz to apply full left track tension, dragging the dead right track through the mud, and simultaneously traversed the turret not toward the Panther, not toward the PaK-40, but 45 degrees to the left, and toward the burning hulk of Lieutenant Forsyth's destroyed Sherman. He fired, not at an enemy, at a burning American tank. The 76mm round hit the wreck's rear deck. The wreck, which still held fuel and hydraulic fluid, detonated in a secondary explosion that sent a wall of black smoke and flame directly across the sight line between the Panther and Reeves's tank. 3 seconds of visual obstruction, maybe 4. Getz used those 4 seconds to drag the Sherman 7 meters to the left, into the shadow of the hedgerow, out of the pre-registered kill zone, out of the Panther's prepared sight line. When the smoke cleared, Reeves's Sherman was gone. Brenner scanned his sector. Nothing. He keyed his radio. Wie viele Amerikaner sind da draußen? How many Americans are out there? No one had an answer. He is behind the hedgerow now. Right track destroyed. The tank can turn left, but cannot fully traverse right under its own power. He is, by any conventional calculation, mission killed. The manual says, bail out of a mission-killed tank and move on foot to friendly lines. Thomas Reeves does not open the hatch. He has 17 rounds remaining on the rack he can reach alone. He runs the arithmetic of the position in his head the way he used to run engine diagnostics, systematically, without emotion, looking for the one component that still functions. The gun still traverses left. The engine is running. The left track is whole. The hull machine gun is operational if Marsh stays on it. 3 microscenes. 3 minutes that the U.S. Army's after-action report would later describe in the economical language of official documents and as unorthodox but effective. First, he uses the one functional track to drive along the inside of the hedgerow, pressing the tank against the earth bank, using the bocage vegetation as concealment, and comes out at a gap 30 meters east of where the POC 40 crew expects him. The POC 40 is a lethal weapon, but traversing to a new target takes 4 seconds. He fires first. The 76-millimeter round hits the gun shield at point-blank range. The crew scatters into the ditch. The POC 40 is silenced. He has spent 3 rounds. 28 remain. Second, the Panzer team in the stone barn, 2 SS men with a rocket launcher, positioned in a window gap at the eastern wall, fires. The round misses by 2 meters, passes through the open hatch cover, and detonates against the interior of the engine compartment rear wall. And Kowalski is hit by shell fragments in the right arm and the side of his face. He goes down hard. He does not pass out, but he can load, not with one arm. Reeves is now his own loader and gunner simultaneously, which is physically possible in a Sherman only if you accept a rate of fire of approximately 1 round every 45 seconds instead of 10. His hands are moving automatically, loading, traversing, acquiring. This is 2 years of Fort Knox distilled into motion. Third, in the lower window of a stone farmhouse built into the northeast corner of the crossroads, a building that appeared on no briefing map as occupied, that no intelligence report had flagged, that every American planner had treated as a structural element of the German defensive position. He sees a face. An old woman, 70 perhaps. White hair, dark dress. She is standing at the window, looking directly at the Sherman's vision block. Behind her, barely visible in the darkness of the room, he can see movement. 2 small shapes. Children. He has the farmhouse registered in his sight. The Panzer IV hiding behind its northeast corner, using the stone wall as hull defilade, is his clearest shot at the most dangerous remaining German vehicle on the battlefield. 1 round into the corner. The Panzer IV loses its cover. Everything changes. If he fires into that corner, the people inside die. He does not fire into that corner. His assault plan changes in the next 4 seconds. He will not fire at the building. That means he cannot directly engage the Panzer IV from his current angle without exposing himself to a direct shot from its 75-millimeter gun. That means he has to find another approach, a longer route, through more open ground, under fire. With a broken track, an injured loader, and Eldon Marsh on the bow gun saying something in German, which Private First Class Eldon Marsh from Iowa does not normally do. But Eldon Marsh from Iowa is doing it now, because they are, objectively, in a position from which survival has become a matter of debate. Reeves backs the Sherman into the hedgerow. He runs his ammunition count again. He checks Kowalski's wound, deep, bleeding steadily. not arterial. He touches his breast pocket with his free hand, feels the fold of paper through the jacket fabric. Then he does something his surviving crew members never quite manage to explain. Instead of moving toward the remaining Panther, his primary objective, he drives the broken Sherman directly toward the burning hulk of Lieutenant Forsyth's destroyed tank, directly into the most exposed ground on the entire battlefield, directly into the sightlines of two remaining SS vehicle positions. No explanation, no radio call. The Germans watch this and do not know what to do with it. A professional force defending a fortified position against a single damaged tank, and the tank is moving toward the most exposed place on the field. Neither does his own crew. The answer comes later. He stops behind the burning Sherman. The temperature inside the tank is approximately 110 degrees Fahrenheit. He has been in the seat for 43 minutes. He has not eaten since 0400. He has had half a canteen of water since yesterday evening. His hands are working correctly, but there is a tremor starting in his left knee that he cannot make stop. And he is aware of it the way you become aware of a sound that was always there, but you have only just started hearing it. Kowalski is breathing. He can hear that. He cannot see Marsh's face from where he sits. Getz has not spoken in 11 minutes, which either means he is managing or he is past managing. And there is no way to know which without asking. And Reeves does not ask, because some things you need to not know during a fight. He looks through the vision block at the farmhouse window. The old woman is still there. There are two children fully visible now, a girl of perhaps 8, and a smaller boy behind her. The girl is holding something out toward the tank. He cannot tell what. A doll, maybe, or a piece of bread. He cannot tell from here. He thinks briefly about what will happen if he fails to take this crossroads. The battalion does not advance. The supply corridor stays closed. The next attempt comes in 12 or 24 hours, and it costs more Shermans and more men with names like Forsyth and Kowalski and Marsh, men from Alabama and Pittsburgh and Iowa who had completely reasonable plans to go back to completely ordinary lives. He thinks about the letter. Come home, Tommy. I made your room nice. Clara, 14, made his room nice. He presses both hands flat against the warm metal of the turret wall and holds them there until the left knee stops. It takes about 30 seconds. He counts. This is not a man in the grip of inspiration. This is not a soldier steeling himself with patriotism or ideology or the memory of a flag. This is a steady man from Ohio who has removed every option except one, and who has decided, without drama, without ceremony, with nothing but the flat finality of a man who has done the arithmetic, to go through it. He calls back to Getz. Howie, Getz. Yeah. Reeves. Last pass. Getz. Yeah. There is a silence between them that holds everything neither man will ever say out loud about what that exchange costs. What it means to say last pass in a broken tank outside a German position and have the man beside you answer, yeah, just yeah, and begin to drive. Then Reeves traverses the turret, settles his eye against the gun sight, and gives the order to move. He moves. And here is the explanation for the irrational decision in Section 5. And when Reeves drove the broken Sherman toward Forsyth's burning hulk, toward the most exposed ground on the battlefield, he was not acting randomly. He had seen, during that drive, the precise angle of the Panzer IV's gun shadow against the farmhouse wall as the morning sun came through the smoke. The Panzer IV was positioned with its front facing south. The expected American approach. It had never rotated to face north because the burning Sherman wreckage had been the northern boundary of the battlefield since the ambush. No American would come from that direction. The Germans had not pre-registered a shot in that arc. It was a dead zone. Reeves had spent 11 minutes maneuvering into a position from which he could approach the Panzer IV from its north, from its blind side, using the farmhouse wall as his own screen from the Panther to the west. It was not madness. It was geometry that only worked if the Germans believed he was doing something irrational. He moved. He fired. The 76-millimeter round took the Panzer IV in the engine deck at a range of 60 meters. The side armor thin enough at that angle that the M1A1 gun found what the front would have deflected. The Panzer IV began burning at 0647. Now the crossroads began to come apart. Brenner, watching from inside the Panther, now had a burning Panzer IV between himself and the American tank. The fire obscured his shot. His gunner attempted to traverse. Brenner keyed his radio to report the American's position to his remaining crew. There was no coherent response. His third crew reported they were taking fire from, they weren't sure where. From the hedgerow? From the north? Was it more Americans? Was it one American? How many were there? Wasinzi. Brenner's voice had changed from the flat, professional command tone of a man directing a defense to something sharper, with an edge in it he had not heard in himself since 1942. Where are they? How many? The Panzerschreck team in the barn fired blind. A round that hit stone 8 meters to Reeves's left and showered the Sherman with fragments. Reeves traversed left, fired his second-to-last round. The barn's roof collapsed onto the Panzerschreck position. The sound that came from inside was brief. 2 positions down. 1 Panther left. Brenner's crew was no longer operating as a unit. His loader had opened the escape hatch. His radio operator was giving conflicting directions. The 2 SS infantry squads that had been positioned to hold against dismounted attack had retreated 40 meters east, and Brenner could hear them on the radio saying things he would later not include in his after-action report. Things that had the register of men who have stopped calculating and started pleading. Reeves came around the northwest corner of the crossroads. The Panther was there. 80 meters. Turret beginning to traverse toward him. Slowly, because Brenner's hydraulic traverse system had taken a fragment hit earlier in the engagement that no one had noticed until it mattered. The turret was moving at perhaps 1/3 its designed speed. He loaded his last 76-millimeter round himself. He fired. The round hit the Panther's side armor at 65 degrees, not a full penetration, but enough. The traverse mechanism seized. 2 engine deck covers blew. The Panther's engine coughed, shuddered, and stopped. Brenner gave the order to abandon the vehicle. They bailed through the hatches. They ran toward the tree line. The crossroads fell silent at 0652. 33 minutes after the 5-tank assault had become 1 man in a broken tank. Reeves turned the Sherman to face the farmhouse window. The old woman was still there. She had not moved. She was looking at him with an expression he would spend the rest of his life trying to describe to people who hadn't been there and never quite manage. The children were beside her now. The girl was holding out the thing he hadn't been able to identify from distance. It was bread. She held it up toward the tank's vision block, like an offering to something she didn't have a better word for. One sentence of silence after the last shot. Let it breathe. Then Thomas Reeves, alone in his turret with a destroyed track and 2 wounded men, and no ammunition, and a letter in his breast pocket, put his face in his hands, and sat there without moving for 90 seconds. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The crossroads was taken. American forces arrived at point X7 at 0731. What they found? 1 destroyed Panzer IV, Ausführung H. 1 destroyed POC 40 anti-tank gun. 1 collapsed stone barn containing the remains of a Panzerschreck position. 1 Panther Ausführung G, intact but immobilized. Its traverse mechanism destroyed, its crew gone, which would later be examined by U.S. Army Ordnance with considerable interest. The 46 spent 76mm shell casings. 3 dead SS infantrymen. Blood trails indicating additional wounded casualties carried from the position by retreating forces. And 1 M4A1 Sherman, engine still running, right track destroyed, parked at the center of the crossroads with its main gun empty, and its commander sitting on the turret drinking from a canteen a French civilian had handed up to him. The medical sergeant who arrived with the relief column, Sergeant First Class Bernard Oakes, later wrote, Kowalski was the color of chalk, but alive. Marsh was on his knees in the field when we got there, and for a minute I thought he was hit, but he didn't get up for a while. Getz was fine, physically. He just sat in the driver's seat and wouldn't come out. Reeves looked at me like I was late. 6 captured SS soldiers were taken in the surrounding area in the following 48 hours. All 6 were interrogated by U.S. Army military intelligence at a collection point near Cannes. The transcripts from those interrogations were classified for 11 years and partially declassified in 1955. An American interrogator asked one of the captured men, a 23-year-old SS Panzer grenadier named Erich Thoma, who had been a loader in the Panzer IV crew before it was destroyed, how many American tanks had attacked the crossroads. Thoma's answer, translated directly from the German, Ein, nur ein. 1, only 1. The interrogation transcript documents that the American officer asked Thoma to repeat and confirm this answer. Thoma confirmed it. He then added, we could not understand it. Our Brenner Hauptsturmführer tried to count them by their sound. There was only the one sound. We could not believe the one sound. SS Hauptsturmführer Klaus Brenner was captured separately near Falaise in late August 1944. His post-war interrogation, conducted by British Army intelligence officers in 1946, asked him specifically about the engagement at Bourget-Bousse Ridge. Brenner was a composed man. By all interrogation accounts, professional, direct, without obvious distress. He answered questions efficiently. When asked about Point X7, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, translated from German, we had been told the Sherman with the long gun was the one to destroy first, before it could destroy us. We had always been told this. At Bourget-Bousse, there was one such tank, and we did everything we had been trained to do, and we couldn't stop it. I do not fully understand why. My crew did everything correctly. He paused again. Then, he was not fighting the way a tank is supposed to fight. He was fighting the way a man fights when he has decided he is not going to stop. Among the captured SS soldiers from that wider action, something else emerged independently during interrogation. Several men, in separate sessions, used the same phrase to describe what had happened at Point X7. The phrase, which the British Army translator noted, was not standard military vocabulary, but appeared to have been coined in the field and passed between men, was Der Feuergeist, the fire spirit. It was not a formal designation. It was a word that had passed between SS soldiers in the hedgerows as the crossroads fell, and they tried to explain to each other what they were retreating from. The specific action that generated the nickname was identified in multiple independent accounts. The moment when Reeves fired a 76 millimeter round into a burning American tank, his own side's destroyed vehicle, to generate a smokescreen. Several SS soldiers had witnessed this action from positions around the crossroads. A man who uses a burning friend's wreck as a weapon, they said, in various phrasings across several interrogations, is not a man who operates by normal rules. Gefreiter Anton Hess, a 19-year-old SS infantryman who had been positioned at the Eastern Road Junction, said this 4 weeks after the battle. When the smoke cleared and he was gone, when there was nothing where we knew he had been, that is when I stopped being afraid of dying and started being afraid of him. Those are different fears. I did not know they were different until that day. The old woman in the farmhouse was identified as Madame Hélène Fortier, 71 years of age, a widow of the Great War. Her grandchildren, Colette, 8 years old, and Marcel, 5, had been sheltering with her for 9 days. She gave a statement to U.S. Army Civil Affairs officers on July 19th. In it, she said, "The tank stopped in front of my window. The soldier inside, I could not see his face, but his head came up through the top. And he looked at my grandchildren, and then he looked away, and I knew he had understood. He did not fire at our house, as he went around through the worst of it. I do not know how he survived what he went around through. I do not think a person should be able to do that." On September 14th, 1944, the United States Army awarded Staff Sergeant Thomas Allen Reeves the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration the United States can bestow, presented for extraordinary heroism in action against an armed enemy. The citation reads, in part, Staff Sergeant Reeves, commanding his tank with complete disregard for personal safety after the loss of crew support, destroyed or disabled 3 enemy, armored, and artillery positions, neutralized an enemy anti-tank rocket position, and secured the designated objective single-handedly following the failure of the original assault force. His actions were instrumental in opening the supply corridor south of Caen and directly enabled the subsequent advance of the battalion. The tactical ingenuity, physical courage, and leadership displayed by Staff Sergeant Reeves reflect the highest traditions of the United States Army. He was presented the decoration in a field near Aachen, Germany, 3 months after Normandy, by Brigadier General Maurice Rose, who shook his hand twice and said, according to a witness present, nothing worth reporting, because the handshake said it. Reeves never gave a formal interview about July 18th. He answered direct questions when asked, briefly, without performance. In a letter to Clara, written sometime in September 1944, he mentioned the crossroads in a single sentence. "The one I told you I'd tell you about when I got home. I can tell you now. I came home from it. Just a little smaller than before." What he meant by smaller, he never clarified. He came home to Zanesville, Ohio, in November 1945. He worked in his father's hardware store. He went to church on Sundays. He never applied for a commission. He married a woman named Ruth in 1947. They had 3 children. He did not know, until 1957, what the German soldiers had called him. A historian compiling a study of the Normandy breakout contacted him with translated interrogation transcripts. Reeves read them at his kitchen table in Zanesville, with Ruth across from him and 2 of his children doing homework nearby. He read Brenner's account. He read Thoma's answer. Ein, nur ein. He read what Anton Hess had said about the 2 different kinds of fear. He sat with the pages for a long time. Then he folded them carefully. I put them on the table and said, in the account of the historian who was present, "Well, I was just trying to get home." Clara's letter remained in a wooden box on his dresser until he died in 1987. Here is what the record shows. Thomas Reeves was given intelligence that was wrong. The position held twice the armor he was told to expect, and 3 times the infantry. The route that was supposed to be clear had been compromised in the night. The plan, 5 tanks, coordinated advance, infantry support, was dead before the first Sherman turned the corner. His orders changed when he was too deep to follow them. The radio said retreat. He was already inside the place the retreat was retreating from. The ambush was designed specifically for this engagement. A hidden Panzer IV, pre-positioned in darkness, triggered at the moment of maximum exposure. It should have killed him. It did not, because in the 2 seconds between the track hit and the Panther's traverse, he saw something in the geometry of a burning wreck that no one else on that battlefield could see. And he used it. And through all of it, he changed his attack to keep an old woman and 2 children alive. He went the harder way. He exposed himself to the worst of it, rather than fire 1 round that might have ended everything faster and killed 3 people who had not asked to be at a crossroads in Normandy on a July morning. These things do not appear in the Distinguished Service Cross citation. The citation covers what he destroyed. It does not cover what he chose not to destroy and why. If you are a veteran reading or watching this, you know this weight, not the glory of it, the specific private weight of a decision made in a burning world with no one watching and no guarantee that anyone will ever know you made the right choice. You have been in some version of that Sherman. Maybe you have sat with your hands pressed flat against something, a wall, the ground, the inside of a hull, waiting for them to stop shaking. You know what it cost to decide to stand up after that. This is for you. If you are a civilian, understand this. Thomas Reeves was not an extraordinary man before the war. He was steady. He was good with engines. He had a little sister who made his room nice. He became what he became, not because he was born different from other men, but because circumstances stripped away every other option until only the extraordinary one was left. And he took it without ceremony and without announcement, and without any particular belief that anyone would ever know. And then he came home. And he didn't talk about it much, and he worked in a hardware store. And he folded a letter and kept it in a box. And somewhere in the files of a British Army intelligence archive, a captured SS Hauptsturmführer, who had killed tanks from Kursk to Caen, sat in a stone room in 1946 and went quiet before he answered a question about an American sergeant he had never seen, only heard, a man who had moved through his perfect, practiced, battle-hardened defense like something his training had given him no language for. Der Feuergeist, the fire spirit, not the name Thomas Reeves chose, not the name his army gave him. The name his enemies gave him because they had no other word for what he was. What your enemies say about you when they have no reason to lie is the truest measure of what you were. Clara made his room nice. He came home. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss these forgotten stories of extraordinary American courage. Who should we tell next? Drop their name in the comments.